This is DadAwesome, episode 157. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we've got my pastor, Pastor Peter Haas, joining us for the third part of a three-part series, long-form interview where we're like, let's go deep dive, an hour and a half of content. And I've broken into three kind of 25-minute episodes. But today, I believe, is going to be the most practical, the most impactful. There's been a lot of setup. There's been some practical, but we're going to get really practical today around screens and technology and smartphones. We're going to go deeper dive into talking to our kids about why does pain exist in the world? Why would a perfect God create a world where pain and heartache and unanswered prayers happen? This is a big deal. Today we're going to talk about back after our schedules again, back after our priorities as dads and what really matters. So I'm so thankful you guys are joining us. Make sure you jump back next week, episode 158. That's our 3-year birthday as a podcast, as a ministry. But I'm excited for you to jump in with my lead pastor, Pastor Peter Haas, for episode 157. Let's go after it. The top polled kind of theme to talk to you about was around raising kids who love Jesus.
Yeah.
And again, an area that I think every dad feels inadequate. Every dad feels like they don't have what they need to help their kids fall in love with Jesus. Yep. And then the second side of that question was actually around conversations with our kids around a loving, all-powerful God and why the world would have evil, sin, hurt. So maybe you can hit on both those sides. I mean, it's a massive question, but like give us some coaching in that area.
Yeah, well, first off, having a window in a ritual, a nightly ritual, where your kids know they can ask you questions in this window.
Yeah.
My kids would pose the weirdest questions to me on a regular basis. And sometimes I would overcoach it, and sometimes they just wanted to talk. But it was almost like them having access to me. And then we go on a journey together. And I'll give them a little nugget. We'll read a book together. But at the end of the day, it's like going back to the very beginning. I need them to know, planted in the house of the Lord. Mm-hmm. If you have 4 to 7 Christian friends, ministry, and really a mentor, that's the third element, is you should. Sometimes my wife and I would tag team like, hey, that's a better question for your mom. Or she would say that to me, that's a better question for your dad. Or you know what we need to do is we need to go talk to this friend at church this Sunday. And we would go, and I can't tell you how many times Nate Puccini on staff here, he'll ask me a question, and then we'll tag team with each other's kids, where I'll be like, Elijah, you need to go ask Pastor Nate that question, and then Pastor Nate will talk to them about that. We're using all of our relationships to coach each other. It's the old, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And then. So what we're going to do is or I would actually have like, Elijah, you're going to do free babysitting for this couple in the church. And then you're going to ask them this question when you do it. And I can't tell you how many divine conversations that even if my wife and I weren't able to have, they were able to have by living in community. And our kids need to know you always live in community so that when crisis comes, you have a support network. And listen, 6th grade girls will always struggle with friends. So your kids will never have friends at church until they do all of a sudden. And so it's kind of forcing them to show up until it works. All of our kids hated church. And this is in my own church. And we have a great church. Yeah. But it's kind of forcing them in the midst of those awkward friendships to keep showing up and coming back. And then once they have that rootedness, then like now my son texts all of his youth group friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, but my daughters didn't have as many youth group friends. But they had more adult staff friends. And so it was like paying staff members to go out to coffee with my friend. Hey, parents, if you got to pay $20 to have that one cool youth leader take them out to coffee, awesome, do it. Yeah. We paid everybody to take. My kids didn't even know that we paid people to take them out. They just thought they were cool, you know?
Well, you're architecting their journey, though, which is by placing key people along that journey, whether it's pulling them in with another staff, or I just think about show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yep.
We're in the agricultural metaphor, right? Like we're planting seeds now with our friendships, us dads.
Yep.
The level of friends that we have as couples, other couples,
Yep.
we actually are developing a team for our kids of safe, wise, trusted, accessible, that who knows, maybe some of those hobbies that I'm developing with my daughter are an easy handoff hobby to this friend of my wife's or this friend of mine or this couple to go and learn and be mentored. So we're actually building their mentoring pipeline for them.
Well, in fact, I actually, on a weekly basis, I probably go up to one of my friends and say, hey, could you text my son on fill in the blank? He needs more accountability, partners. Could you, on this topic, or could you reach out to him and just say, hey, can we talk? And it's funny, how my kids never really even thought, oh, my dad reached out to you, and they didn't
connect it.
They just think this is life.
Yeah.
This is, we just do life as a collective.
Normalizing it.
Yeah. I even think about like Zoe, one of our social media and worship staff, took my daughter to the Mall of America, and they just went shopping. You know, like you're just building their support network and their mentors.
Yeah.
And if I can't do it, then there's somebody who can. And if I don't know it, there's somebody who does know it. And so it's actually their ecclesiology, their model of church. To fall in love with God is to fall in love with his church. And so my daughter, we coached her when we brought her to Florida. Your job, we're going to help you find 3 different churches. You're going to check them out. I'm going to hold you accountable to going. Then once you've checked them out, then your job is to go to their membership class. Actually, what's funny is I was down in Florida speaking at a church, and I wanted my daughter to come visit me because I was only an hour away. And she goes, Dad, I can't. I'm going through the membership process, and I'm in week 3, and I need to get through it so I can join the worship band. And I'm like, shut up.
Locked in.
You're literally not even going to visit your dad. And yet I was secretly proud.
Yeah.
And then she was like, I'm meeting with the staff member. And I'm like, okay, when you meet with that staff member, buy them a Starbucks card, you serve them, tell them like you'll do anything for free. And I'm coaching her how to get integrated in her church in Florida. And now she's totally integrated. There was that first week, she goes, Dad, I have to go by myself. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. Once you go by yourself, you're going to find people. So befriend them, get to know other people in the church. And it's teaching them to get addicted to friendships. And then that love for God will constantly be reinforced.
Yeah. And part of this you already answered, but to go back around to that question about pain and hurt and sin, how could a loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God, like in just that tenderness in our kids, like wrestling with this, how outside of, again, helping them have the friends and mentors in church to help wrestle, how would you coach us dads with processing that topic?
Well, at the end of the day, for the deep questions about God, those are some of the toughest questions you can ask about God. And they naturally will start to find the answers when they're in loving community. I won't always know why, but I know God's plan is good.
Yeah.
And I know that God is still my best option in the midst of pain. Even this year, there's a million why questions. Well, at the end of the day, it's hard to blame God when he is your source of strength. And at the end of the day, I don't know why evil, but I know that God has chosen to use it and to creatively thwart it. And so my whole thing is when you surround people with godly people who are generous, who are reflecting the nature of God, I think those answers, those questions naturally get answered in the process of living in community. It's those people that are trying to answer that question with no good Christian friends and no good Christian mentors. They'll never be able to understand God because you cannot understand God apart from his church.
Yeah. That's so helpful. That's so, just add the period right there because it's true, and we have to have it. It's mission critical.
It is. It is.
Well, and it probably is going to go into this next question as well. So around technology, smartphones, texting, screens, all of that good that can be used for good also can be really overwhelming for the dad who's trying to navigate boundaries.
Really
give us some coaching on the side of how you've navigated technology.
Well, first off, create rules younger. If you try to create rules after the fact, it's harder. Like our oldest daughter, we didn't require her to plug her phone in downstairs, and until it was too late. And then it was taking something away is harder than not ever really allowing it to be that big in the first place. And so like with video games, we just put like a time rule. Like you can play this long a day, and it has to be social. But if you're independently playing, you can only do it for this long. Or if you have a phone, plug it in by 10 o'clock because we didn't realize that until later on, and then their friends are texting them at 11:45. And sometimes it'd always be about homework. Well, I don't care if it's about homework. I don't want you texting your friends when you're exhausted. Or I don't want my son on his phone late at night when he's exhausted because that's when temptation sets in. Or talking about porn early before he even knows what it is. Well, let me actually have to define it for you. And let me talk about, let me get involved in, and then the problem is that you have to be in it with them. My kids never got into Facebook, but they were into Snapchat. And so then I had to learn how does Snapchat work. And then I realized how much news is marketed at them through Snapchat. Well, I don't want to learn Snapchat. I'm lazy as a parent, but I have to. I had to go on to Snapchat and learn how to log a streak with my kids. What are the technologies they're doing? So my kid got into Roblox. Well, I heard that, there's pedophilia on Roblox. I have to learn Roblox. I have to learn Minecraft. I have to learn. As a parent, I'm always learning the apps that my kids are watching, learning what are the possible things they could be exposed to through this app, the types of friends in the chats that I have to, I hate to say it, but you have to, if you forbid your kids, I had to learn Fortnite, and then I have to learn Call of Duty. And when is it not appropriate? What video games are appropriate? What are not appropriate? You hear the rumors about Pokemon. Well, let me log hours learning Pokemon. I hate to say it, but as a parent, you have to engage. Telling people no, they're just going to do it behind your back. So instead of doing the denial, a lot of parents actually use rules because they're lazy. In fact, legalism, it's lazy parenting. I'm going to forbid my kids from doing something. Well, your kids are getting exposed to it secretly at school anyway. So my whole thing is engage. Like, instead of being the forbid parent, be the engaged parent, and just talk about it so frequently that you're creating rules on the go. And learn how to use parental. You can have your kids' apps auto shut off after so many hours. You can have their phone auto shut down at a certain time. And all of it has to be negotiated with each one of my individual kids. Some of my kids didn't really care about tech. They naturally wanted to be outside. Other of my kids, it was all they wanted. And so then I would use it as leverage. Well, once you finish your chores, then you can do 1 hour of social video game time, only these video games, or FaceTiming with friends. We don't FaceTime after 10 p.m. And we don't. And then they would FaceTime how many guys? Well, we don't. But they would do this whole thing where they were all playing a video game with, and there happened to be a girl, and then it happened to be, you're secretly dating, and you're not calling it dating, but I know what it is. Let's just talk about it, and so technology, it's embracing the tech, and then,
It's wild. I feel like most dads who asked that question about tech thought there'd be a simple answer, and you were like the professor that just handed a dozen books, and you're saying this is a work, this is a journey, this is a massive amount of homework, massive amount of learning, and we cannot be scared off we have to press in.
Every night, I have to flop on my kid's bed and ask them, what are the top apps you're looking at?
Yep.
What are the top YouTubers you're looking at, watching? And sometimes it's none.
Yep.
But
and none of us had this modeled for us. None of us, because we did not have a dad. We were, or at least maybe some of the younger dads had a dad who was highly engaged. But I mean, and this will age me a little bit, but I didn't get a smartphone until 6 months after I graduated from college. Okay, so dorm phone, right? It's a whole new frontier for us.
Well, and that's the problem, is that none of these hobbies are natural or native to us.
Right.
And so you do have to be a learner to be a leader.
Yep.
And so you don't let your kids just do this on your own. I actually had to lay down my hobbies in order to be a dad in the golden window. And now my kids are old enough where they're starting to take on my hobbies. They want to learn how to do music producing, and my oldest daughter wanted to learn DJing. And it's almost like once your kids are older, they'll start taking on your hobbies. And I think it's easier now to be a dad in this season. But back then, it was me jumping into whatever new thing they're doing.
Well, back to these questions, because I have so many great ones. So the topic of, it's best case that maybe 10%, 20% of us dads had a dad who put his arm around us and said, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about the birds and the bees. We are not talking about one conversation here. We are talking about entering a pathway of maybe forever dialogue around sexual purity and around I'm here for you. And but coach us on the conversations around pornography, sexual purity, sex. Like, go a little further into that topic.
Well, just know that when you first start talking about it, you will feel awkward, and just jump headlong into awkward. Okay. It's like jumping into a cold swimming pool. Sometimes you just got to do it. My first conversation with my son was so awkward, and I don't know why. I'm paid to be articulate. I have never gotten more tongue tied in my life. And I was like, okay, son, have you ever noticed the neighbor's dogs? I entered into the conversation. I could not have done it worse. And then even my son literally was like, hey, Dad, can we just go play catch instead? He even ended the conversation.
Time out on this first round.
And I'm like, you're right. Let's just, I actually was like, let's kill this one. I'll approach this later. And we went and played catch.
That's amazing.
But you just gotta have the conversation, and to the point where my son we'd even get really awkward about it, talking about erections, talking about masturbation, getting him comfortable. We'd call it feeding the geese, also known as masturbating. We'd call it, I want to give my son a vocabulary. I want to talk about it as often as possible. Where and to the point where it got so not awkward that any given night my son could come and just talk to me about, hey, Dad, tell me about this, tell me about that.
It's a gift.
And it ended up becoming a beautiful thing. But my wife, I had to kind of nudge my wife to have more of the conversations with our girls, and she naturally had it. And so there is a tag teaming, depending on the genders of your kids.
Sure.
There's a tag team, but it's talking about it often and reading books together. It's, like engaging, like Covenant Eyes just came out, getting protection for your child's devices. I would regularly ask my son, have you ever seen any pornography? And there's a lot of hidden pornography in YouTubers, is kind of the hardest one to monitor. And yet, paying the money for Covenant Eyes, some of these accountability mechanisms, it's worth it to protect your kids from it, because kids are getting exposed to pornography earlier and earlier and earlier now. And so just having the conversation.
And then just going back around to the foundations, building a house, that metaphor of like, can we create a connection, a heart connection with our kids so that they will come to us and it's safe? And then, but not expecting that we're also pursuing and asking the very directed questions of, have you seen anything?
Kids aren't mature enough to seek out the healthy conversations. And so it's more like me being intentional. Like actually, whenever I'm goal setting, every 3 months, I always have goals with my kids. Okay. what are the conversations, impartations, demonstrations I want to have? And so if I happen to know, oh, there's a big offering coming up at church, well, I want to actually talk to my kids about the Heart for the House offering. And a lot of times it's me just saying, hey, mom and dad are going to be giving this type of money, or maybe it's like right now or around Christmas time, we're going to buy a present for a foster kid. Yeah. And I want you to personally sacrifice. What are you going to contribute? This, and then be a part of the prayer process. This is how we live generously. This is how we to the point where like even my kids were like, my kids they bought, my 6th grader took all of their money and bought an iPhone for somebody, another one of their friends who didn't have one, who had a single parent. And I couldn't believe that they actually were going to spend all of their money being that generous.
Wow.
And so they're seizing those moments and having those. So I have these goals with my kids. And so at any given, right now my goal would be to mentor my daughter's boyfriend more. For one child, or for my son, it's more just to find a new video game because we lost our common interest. He doesn't like that video game anymore. Okay. Or to find a new sport. There's always like I need another common interest. And so what am I going to do?
Say quarterly, you're setting these goals.
Oh, absolutely. Because it evolves that fast.
Yeah.
Because they all of a sudden, that common interest disappeared as fast as it appeared.
Yeah. So before I give you kind of final words and just sharing anything on fatherhood, the last question really came down. A bunch of dads were wondering, man, work-life balance, and specifically, dads who own a business. They're building a business that will bless their family, and they're building a family, and just how to navigate. I mean, the juggling metaphor of glass ball, rubber ball, but any more advice coaching for, again, this dad who's building something, has the work career, and that tension between building their family.
Yeah. Again, we all cheat to what we can count. And I've never, like, there is that you want income. To increase your income and increase your success. But I will say this, no amount of income or success you'll never reach the top and say enough is enough.
Right.
And I actually think it's easier to actually spend less and or just turn, I'll say it this way, turn your 2-year goals into 10-year goals when you are a parent. The window with your kids happens way faster than you think it will. Yeah. Your kids grow up way faster than you think they will. And now I'm at this point where I have all sorts of extra time now that I'm launching kids, or my oldest is launched, my second one is working all the time, and it's really just me and my youngest son, and I have all this extra time to sow into my professional life. You'll have endless hours to don't worry about it's just embrace being slightly more poor. You're like, I actually just told I don't worry. My oldest grew up poor, and they don't miss it. Yeah. It's like, who cares? Yep. Who cares? Like, don't try to provide a million opportunities for your kids. Just be present. Don't try to offer your kids the best of everything. My kids were the last to get phones, the last to get the cool TV. My kids were the poorest of their whole social clique. They don't regret it. They don't miss it. They don't care.
And that jumps to Mark 4:18. You shared this in one of your amazing parenting blog posts, which we'll link in the show notes here. But you were like, hey, don't be like the seed among thorns. Here's the parable of the seed and the sower. They hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke out the word, making it unfruitful.
That's right. At the end of the day, my main vocation when my kids are young, it's hanging out with them from dinner until bedtime and being in church together, finding a ministry together, constantly dragging them into the church, not because it's my vocation, but because it's planted in the house of the Lord will flourish.
Yep.
They have the rest of their lives to do hobbies and get extra stuff. So I always just want to make sure, hey, let's live the lifestyle of a family that loves each other right now.
Yep.
And now they're just welcoming their friends into that family.
Yep.
And I feel like my family just keeps getting bigger with boyfriends and friends.
Yep.
And I'm just mentoring more and more kids. And, you know, they may not have always had the nicest cars, the nicest house, they didn't have the most opportunities of all their friends. But they definitely can say they have the most fun family.
Yeah.
And that's what I want my kids to be able to say. The desires for other things, there's always going to be other things.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground here. And our prayer here as a ministry, and this ministry would not exist if it wasn't for you believing in me. So I'm very, very grateful.
We love you,
Our prayer, right back at you, is that we would be adding life to the dad life, that we would be intentionally adding life to the dad life. Is there any topics we haven't covered that you wanted to just add, or add an exclamation point around ways that we could be dads who add life to the dad life?
Find dads who are living out your dreams and get around them. Just spend time, seek them out. I think in order to be a good dad, we have to learn how to be a good son. And learning sonship requires seeking out good dads on their terms. And getting around them, hearing how they think, because you don't know even the problems that you're about to solve, because every phase of parenting brings new problems. You don't even know what those things are, but you have to have access to those mentors who can coach you on it. And so, again, who's living out your dreams? What are you doing to earn the right to be around those people? And so that's where the church can be such a networking place. And so you don't even know what you don't know. But good sonship requires initiative. And so always be initiating with somebody new, and teach your kids how to initiate. Don't be one of those people that's like, oh, nobody's available, and have the spirit of rejection on you. Always just seek it out, because you'll start learning something new every time you do it.
And I wonder if some of us dads don't seek it out because we think it's just for us. It's just something that I need for me. And if we thought of it attached to these relationships are a blessing that multiply to our kids, I think that could even frame the initiative being more urgency there of like, you got to take initiative.
Live in community. Even if you're introverted, learn how to get out there and find those people that can be your dad and be a grandparent to your kids.
Yeah. Well, for continued learning, we are going to link about a half a dozen blog posts that you've done on, and then we'll link back to episode 22. So that was when you joined us last time, 2.5 years ago.
Come on.
A lot of times passed since then. So thank you for your support, your love for this ministry, launching this ministry. I mean, it would not exist if it wasn't for you believing in me and in reaching dads far beyond our own church, but also in our church. So we're so grateful. Would you pray over all of us listening?
Oh, absolutely. Heavenly Father, you just want us to be in relationship with you. And I just pray over every dad out there, whether they feel totally isolated and alone or whether they're super connected. I just pray that you just bring divine relationships to mind, people that they need to pursue. And we want to pursue fatherhood, being fathered, as well as being good fathers. And I just pray that you'd give everybody, just bring people to mind or bring conversations to mind that we can that we can take initiative on. Lord, none of us is a natural at this. We all have to grow in this. And yet, Lord, if we just pursue you and pursue your plan, I just know that you have so much joy. Lord, I believe the greatest joys in life come from this topic. And I just pray that you would help us have the motivation and the initiative to truly walk this out. Lord, just favor upon everyone who's listening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us for episode 156 with my lead pastor, Pastor Peter Haas. All of the conversation notes, the transcripts of today's episode, the action steps, all those blog posts that I mentioned are all going to be linked at dadawesome.org/156. You can find all those resources. I mentioned at the top of this episode that we are jumping into our third birthday. So next week's episode is our 3-year anniversary as a podcast. I would love for you to join us again. So come on back next week for episode 157. We'll talk about 3 ways that you can help us celebrate as a ministry turning 3. So come on back next week. Again, hey, thank you for listening. Thanks for diving into this topic of intentional fatherhood. It's a huge deal. Thank you for living fully alive. Let's add some life to the dad life this week. Have a great week.